Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive deep into something fascinating. This time, we're tackling poetry. And don't worry, this isn't just for the lit majors out there. Whether you're poetry pro or you haven't cracked open a poetry book since, well, maybe ever, get ready to uncover some serious aha moments. We're going way back for this one, folks, dusting off Aristotle's Poetics. Yeah, you heard that right. We're going old school.
Yeah.
But trust me, you won't need a toga to keep up. We're going to break it down, pull out the timeless stuff that still resonates today.
Exactly. It's easy to think of poetry as, something from another era, but these tools, the techniques we're about to explore, they're more relevant than ever, especially in how we communicate today.
So true. Okay, let's get into it. First things first. What is poetry, really? Our man Aristotle called it imitation, but not just straight-up copying. What's he
Yeah.
getting at with that?
Great question. It's about a creative representation of the world, not just mirroring reality. Think of it like this. A botanist might give you all the scientific facts about a rose, right down to the cell structure. But a poet, they'll use words to make you feel what that rose represents, maybe the memories it evokes.
So it's less about the literal and more about the vibe.
Exactly. It's about taking words, sounds, and crafting them into something that goes beyond just the facts, something more. Keats, for example, he didn't just describe trees in his poem Hyperion. He called them green-robed senators of mighty woods. Wow. That elevates the image, gives it weight and a deeper meaning.
I used to think poetry was all about flowery language and abstract ideas. But I had this realization recently. I was reading a news story, totally unrelated to poetry, and it hit me how even a straightforward report can have this, poetic angle. It was about a farmer who finally had this amazing harvest after years of drought, and the article described the fields as a sea of gold. And boom, it wasn't just about crops anymore. It was this image of abundance, almost magical.
Isn't it amazing how these subtle uses of poetic language can totally change your perspective? It's like poetry isn't confined to old books. It's woven into how we experience the world every day, even if we don't always realize it.
Which leads us perfectly to our next point. The different forms poetry takes. It's not all sonnets and haikus, right? I mean, you've got epics, those song lyrics that get stuck in your head. What else is out there?
Yeah. Oh, poetry is incredibly diverse, so many forms. Each form has a different purpose, a different way of making the reader or listener feel something specific. You've got your epics like Beowulf, these huge, sprawling stories that explore things like heroism and myths. Then there's dramatic poetry, literally meant to be performed, think Shakespeare, full of drama and emotion. And then, of course, lyric poetry, which is generally shorter, more about personal emotions and feelings.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of modern poetry seems to live, wouldn't you say? Song lyrics, spoken word, even some of those Instagram captions people agonize over. Speaking of epics, though, it made me think about something I found in the Norton Anthology of Poetry. By the way, what a fantastic resource. It really struck me how many of these classic stories, Beowulf, the Greek myths, even Shakespeare's plays, they were originally poems. So how do those epic forms differ from something like a song lyric, for example?
It's all about scale and intensity. An epic poem, it unfolds over hundreds of lines, sometimes thousands. It's like building a whole world within the poem itself, with layers of history and characters. Lyrics, on the other hand, they're more like snapshots of feelings, condensed and personal, capturing a specific moment in time.
And even the structure itself, the line length, the rhythm, if there's any rhyme, all that plays into how we experience it, right?
Absolutely. And that brings us to what I find so fascinating, the technical side of poetry. The tools poets use to create those powerful effects.
You're talking about things like metaphor, imagery.
Yeah.
I know it might sound a little intimidating, but I came across this quote from an ASU news article that really resonated with me. It said that poetry can capture both facts and feelings at the same time, something other types of writing often struggle with. How does poetry pull that off?
That is the heart of it. It's those poetic devices, those techniques that allow poetry to do that. Instead of just telling you what something is, they show you. They create this whole sensory experience for the reader with just the words themselves. Take metaphor, for example. Shakespeare, comparing his beloved to a summer's day in Sonnet 18, so classic. Now, he's not saying she's literally the sun, right? But by using that comparison, he's bringing out her beauty, her warmth, her life-giving energy.
And that lands so much harder than just saying she's pretty, right?
Yeah.
It gives you this whole image to unpack, to connect with emotionally. And it's not just metaphor either. There's imagery, using words to paint these vivid pictures in your mind.
And let's not forget about sound techniques. Think alliteration, repeating those consonant sounds or assonance with the vowel sounds. It creates this musicality within the language itself. Take Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, for example. That haunting O sound repeating throughout Once Upon a Midnight Dreary while I pondered weak and weary. It just draws you in.
You know, you're making me realize how much poetry is already wired into my brain without even realizing it. There are so many song lyrics that have stuck with me over the years, and it's those devices that make them so memorable, like that line, "The silence screamed your name."
Ah,
It's simple, but giving the silence a voice like that creates such a powerful feeling of loss.
that's the magic of it. Poetry distills these big, complex emotions into these potent, often short phrases. A well-crafted poem bypasses your brain and goes straight for the heart.
So we've covered what poetry is, the different forms it can take, the
Yep.
tools poets use. But why should someone care? If you're not trying to be the next Maya Angelou, what's the point of learning all this stuff?
That's where it gets really interesting. It's not just about writing poetry. It's about becoming a better reader, a more critical thinker even. It's about empathy.
Hold on. You're saying reading poetry can make me a better person?
Yeah.
I'm all for self-improvement, but that's a big claim.
Hear me out. When you understand how poets use language, you become more aware of nuance, subtext, the way meaning is created. You start to pick up on those emotional layers in everything you read and hear, not just poetry.
So it's like poetry gives you this like cheat sheet for understanding how communication really works.
Exactly. It helps you see past the surface, to appreciate those layers of meaning, the choices writers make. You see the power of language to persuade, to inspire, to evoke emotions. And guess what? This helps you communicate more effectively, too.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light. This isn't just about dissecting poems in a classroom. It's about using those insights to understand how language works, period, how it connects us as humans.
Precisely. And that's why poetry still matters, even when the world feels obsessed with the practical. It reminds us that language has this incredible power to be more than just ordinary. It can make us feel, challenge us, help us connect with each other on a deeper level.
So you're saying even if I don't consider myself a poetry person, understanding how it works can actually level up my communication skills. That's pretty cool. But how does that work in real life?
Think about it this way. Remember when we talked about metaphor? Let's say you're trying to explain a complex idea at work. Instead of drowning people in technical jargon, you can use a metaphor to make it relatable. Suddenly, everyone's on the same page, and you sound like a communication genius.
Okay, I see how that could be helpful. But what about things like alliteration or assonance? Those seem more like poetry stuff, not things you'd use in everyday life.
You'd be surprised. Those sound techniques are everywhere, especially in advertising and marketing. They make slogans catchy, memorable. Think about it, just do it. Melts in your mouth, not in your hand. Those are using alliteration to make those phrases stick in your brain.
Wow, you're right. I never would have thought of it that way. So you're saying that by paying attention to these poetic devices, even if we don't realize it, they're actually shaping how we understand and respond to the world around us.
Exactly. It's like having this whole other layer of understanding about how language works its magic on us. And the more aware you are of it, the more you can use it to your advantage. But it's not just about manipulation or getting people to buy things.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. There's got to be more to it than that.
There absolutely is. This goes back to what we were saying about empathy. When you understand how poets use language to evoke emotions, to connect with the reader on a deeper level, it opens you up to a greater understanding of the human experience.
So it's not just about analyzing poems in a vacuum. It's about using those insights to connect with others more meaningfully, to see the world through different lenses.
Now you're getting it. It's about appreciating the beauty and power of language, whether it's in a classic poem or a song you hear on the radio. It's about being present, paying attention, and letting yourself be moved by the world around you.
I love that. So where do we go from here? If someone's feeling inspired, wanting to explore poetry more deeply, what would you recommend?
That's the beauty of it. There are so many paths you can take. You could revisit some of those classic poets we mentioned earlier, like Keats, Shakespeare, Poe, explore contemporary poets who are pushing the boundaries of the art form, or even just pay closer attention to the language you encounter every day in books, in music, even in your everyday conversations.
It's like you're saying that poetry's everywhere if we just open ourselves up to experiencing it.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting. It's a reminder that even in our fast-paced world, there's always room for beauty, for reflection, for the power of words to move us and connect us.
This has been eye-opening. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. I think our listeners are walking away with a whole new appreciation for poetry.
My pleasure. Remember, poetry is a journey, not a destination, so keep exploring, keep listening, and keep those words flowing.